Kisumu to Perth, it's
Hi guys, welcome to the K2P Podcast, Kisumu to Perth. My name is Tracy.
My name's Michael.
And today we would just like to have conversations about ourselves, our childhood.
Specifically, the childhood difference growing up here in Australia and in Kisumu, Kenya.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I came up with some questions. I didn't come up with them myself. We got them from...
Doesn't matter.
Yep. Okay, so the first question. I think we're going to put the questions down below.
Wait, just beforehand, let's set the scene. So basically, me and Tracy, we grew up on different parts of the planet. I grew up in Western Australia, in Perth City, which is a modern city, but it's the second most isolated city in the world. And you grew up?
I grew up in Kisumu, specifically in a small, I would call it town, called Ahero, so Ahero, in Kenya. And we lived there pretty much my entire life up to now. So I'm going to give you my perspective of life coming from that small town in Kenya.
Because those two places in the world are drastically different in many, many ways.
Yes.
And so the comparison is quite interesting because not a lot of people would understand. When people come to Australia, their perspectives on life and their mindset is always shaped by your parents and your childhood.
Yeah.
So that's why we thought it would be good to talk about it.
Yes, and just one thing to note is I came to Australia to study and I met my husband Michael here in Australia. So the first question, can you describe your typical day as a child growing up in Kenya? How did it differ from a typical day for a child growing up in Australia?
So start with the morning.
The mornings in Kenya?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go for the day like morning to bedtime.
So I would explain it as in Kenya, most of the time we were always at school, but I'll give a day that we were not at school, or should I just give
So
both?
you slept at school?
No, basically we would be at school from as early as 6:30 and we'll leave school at 6 p.m.
Okay, so your mum would wake you up?
Yes, so our house manager, is that what they're called nowadays? Would have someone, our nanny, yes, our nanny.
Yeah.
Our nanny will wake us up at around 5, I believe, and...
For breakfast?
No, so we had to have a shower every single morning.
Okay.
So our nanny will wake up before us, prepare everything we need to get ready for school.
So that's school clothes.
School clothes, shoes, because
food.
Like in Kenya we wear uniform and you have to wear a certain type, like black, we'll call it Tafiz shoes. I don't know what.
Yeah, I've seen them. They're like private school shoes here.
Yes, so you have to shine them every morning and...
You had to shine your shoes?
Yes, every single day.
You did?
No, our nanny.
So that to be sparkly.
Yes.
Far out.
Yes, and
see, that's already different. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, and we had to wear like a certain type of socks. So the nanny had to wash
the school socks.
Yes, the school socks.
And over there in Kenya, because of the water and how the water is piped into the house, they don't use washing machine, right?
No, we did not have washing machines
back
then.
So the nanny would be scrubbing these clothes.
Yes,
yeah.
It still happens, still date.
Mm-hmm.
So we wash our clothes by hand. That motion.
And then so the nanny, she's got your socks.
Yes.
Yeah.
and our school uniform basically. So then we would wake up because it was me and my siblings, and sometimes, I don't know, she would pick any one of us to be woken up first, because sometimes she'll come and wake me up. I was like, oh, I want to sleep longer.
Yeah.
Or it would be the same for my brother or my sister. So it was always a battle in the morning, but I was a morning person, so I never really kicked a fuss in the morning. So I would be up, having a shower, getting ready, and then my mom would wake up while we're having our showers. So she would try and help us pack our bags for like snacks and stuff like that we would take to school.
And do they have the school bags like here? Like you can choose any school bag, or is it just...
Yes, with the school bags you could pick any.
Oh, that's good. So you can customize your style a little bit.
Yes, so the bags and the stationery and everything, it's up to you really, like what you can afford.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, so we'll get ready. My dad will be getting ready at the same time because he had to drive us to school. So at around 6 o'clock, all four of us will be ready, and my dad will be done getting ready. So then he will drive us to school, and I think the drive to school was about 30 to 40 minutes from where we lived. So it took us quite a while, and on the way there we were all asleep every single morning. We were all asleep up until when we get to school, and then my dad had to wake us up while we were at the gate, and he'll be like, yep, we're here, you can go now. And when you wake up, you're like, oh my God.
And so what age was this? Was this high school or?
No, it was primary school.
Okay, so till 12 years old.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess you couldn't have coffee then.
No, never. But we used to have tea.
Tea still got caffeine.
When we were young, I didn't know that tea had caffeine, but most kids in Kenya drink tea from a very young age. So that's a new thing I learned when I came to Australia. Like, you can't give kids tea. But we had tea from when we were literally maybe even 6 months old.
So you get to the school,
Yeah.
and your dad is like, okay, everyone out of the car.
Yes, and he'll give us some money in case we want to buy food at the school canteen.
And what would they sell, like, is in terms of food?
Donuts, but we call it mandazi in Kenya.
Yeah, and they're not like round ones we
No.
have here, like your American style.
No.
Or they're not like the European style where it's long. These are like cut into squares or triangles.
Yes.
And they're little bite-sized donuts, and they're not coated in sugar, but they're sweet.
Yes, so we'd buy donuts, and they also had like juice. I think they were homemade juice. I don't know how they made them, but we didn't care when we were kids.
What flavor?
Oh, they had random flavors. I don't know. I think they
mix.
It was just more of the color than the flavor. Red and yellow.
Yeah.
Maybe there was, I think it was cordial. Who knows? Tasted good at the time. So they were packed in little recycled water bottles.
Okay.
Yeah, so they sold them for 10 shillings, and I think someone packed them in their house, put them in the fridge, and then sold them at school. And those lollies, those biscuits, whatever you could get at the time.
So you would, so he gave you the money.
Yep.
And then what, you go to socialize or?
No, so sometimes when my dad didn't have change, he had to give one of us the money.
Yeah.
The trusted kids. So it could either be my brother or myself, like depending on who was older and who was, because my brother is a bit older than me. So I think when he finished primary school, it was me, my other brother, and my younger sister. So it depended. It depended on who was given the money, really. Most of the time it was me, because it was me. So I had to get change at break time and give my siblings their money. So it was up to me to decide how much I wanted to give them, because sometimes he gave us more, sometimes it was like the regular amount. So it depended on how I was feeling on the day and how generous I was.
So you, by your mood, determined how hungry your siblings would be.
I guess. But
Hey.
they did the same to me. So it was
Yeah.
always a game. Like if my other siblings got the money, they will give you less. Most definitely. Sometimes you wouldn't get it. So it was always just something we did all the time.
It's just classic sibling
Yeah,
behavior.
sibling rivalry. Yeah, it was fun.
So then you go to class,
Yes.
and then do you have 2 breaks, recess, lunch, or do you have just lunch?
I think when we went to class, there was the first session, which was I think from 6:30 up until, I don't remember really, but there was like a class before we went for the assembly.
Yeah.
And then we had the assembly every single morning. So we'd have one class, then the assembly, then from the assembly we'd have 2 or 3 classes, then a break, then 2 classes, then a break. No, 2 classes, then lunch, and then 2 classes, games, and then 2 classes, home.
You see, I've recently been to Kenya, and the entire vibe of school there is so different to Australia. And one thing about Kenya, if you didn't know, I don't know if it's still a thing there, but when Tracy was younger, they still had corporal punishment.
Oh, it was so bad. I remember, so we used to get homeworks, and you had to you had to do your homework at home, but imagine finishing school at 6 p.m. and then having to do the almost 1 hour drive, because in the evenings the drive back home would take longer because of traffic anyway. So you get home, you're so hungry, you have to eat, you have to have a shower, get yourself settled in, watch a bit of TV or do whatever, and then you have to sit at the table and do your homework. And it wasn't just one, they'll give you like
Heaps.
5 different types of homework you need to do. So I had to pick at least 1 or 2 that I did, but then sometimes I wasn't able to complete the homework. So in the mornings, I think the first lessons we used to have in the mornings were mathematics, and the teacher was so harsh. So I think they knew me for not doing my homework anyways. And every morning when I came to school, I knew I was going to get beaten. So if I was putting on socks, I had to layer my socks. If I was putting on my uniform...
They hit your legs.
Oh, yes.
Hey.
And if I was putting on my uniform, I would put on at least 5 underwears, and even like take a table mat and lay it on my bum.
So your mum... Oh no, the house lady, what's her name? The
nanny.
The nanny.
Yeah.
She's wondering where all this underwear's going.
Yeah, yeah. So I would just find anything and everything that would sit and look natural on my bum, because you also can't make it look crazy big. So I would look for stuff that will look natural and fit the shape of my bum and put them on, so that by the time I get to school, I knew what was going to happen. And for sure, every single morning, I used to get beaten. That was a routine. I was used to it. I just had to prepare for it. And it was kind of funny, because sometimes the teacher would change the location of your punishment. So some days they will hit your hand, some days they will hit your back. So when you're not prepared for the back, that day you're going to get it. Most of the time they knew, because when they hit your bum once, your bum goes boom. It makes that loud sound as if you're hitting the carpet.
Like, twa.
Yes, and then the teacher will realize, like, he won't mention it because it's your girl, and it's like they don't want to ask you the awkward question of, are you putting something in your bum, you know? So then they'll just change, They just change the location of where they're hitting you. So they'll just start hitting you randomly on your back, on your hand, in your...
So, but also like in Kenya, with this beating, it's not just like that. It's a really proper beating.
It's like the
and it's
the
it with a
teachers are...
stick, a wooden stick.
Yeah. They'll just get like a stick from, like a stem from the tree. Doesn't matter the size. Doesn't matter whether it's has the thorns or the little rough things on the stick. So long as it's a stick, it does the job. And it's like you stole something from them, or you're like their enemy. They will beat you.
Well,
like it's their job to do that.
One thing about Kenya that I've realized with the way that they educate people, you see, when you go to Kenya, like most people speak 3 languages. They speak English, Kiswahili, which is the national language, and their tribal language. Now, in Australia, if you meet someone and they happen to mention they speak 3 languages, you think they're like a genius. So it's everyone in Kenya is really highly educated. Even, the different parts of society, the very rich people, the not so rich people, and then the
middle class.
Well, yeah, and then the unfortunately poor people, they're actually highly educated. And the strange thing about Kenya is they have this corporal way of educating their students, and it's like more is better.
Yes.
So you hear like Tracy's had so much homework every day, and then they beat you. And it's like the idea behind the education is we're going to jam this down your throat and make sure you're educated. But you see, it's been proven that after like 3 hours, most of your concentration and things, your faculties in that way are gone.
Yes.
So it's actually not beneficial for you to be forced to study that hard.
Yes, but I think, I don't know where it came from, but it's been like that for many years. They've just changed their education system lately, and I think now it's not as bad as it used to be back then, but some people would differ, because I think other people like the other way better than the new way, because the new way is called CBC. No, I haven't researched it far enough to know what that means, but yeah, it's much more geared towards before it was more about education, like the math, the English, the Swahili is Kiswahili, the national language in Kenya, the science, social studies and stuff like that. But now they're trying to teach kids more art, music, daily life activities, like how would you build this, how would you fix this in case it's broken, cleaning, stuff like
you see that's what happened in the West as well. There, when I was growing up, I actually grew up with older people than what my parents' age would be, and they would say, back in our day we'd do reading, writing and arithmetic, which was what they used to call mathematics. And there were those certain subjects.
Yeah.
But now, like, you have in school, you have social studies, woodwork, metalwork,
yes,
art, music, filmmaking.
yeah,
And it's like these more individuality focused
yeah,
courses.
yeah, you could get something you like.
Yeah, it's more enriching for, if you find a balance, I think, between those strong subjects, because there's no point in being an expert at maths if all you want to do is be like something to do with filmmaking, or you know,
Yes.
it's not gonna like. You should cater towards your avenue of what your talent is. You know.
Yes. And where was I before?
You were saying baiting, the baiting.
Oh yeah, we got beaten. That was the order of the day. I think it was normal, and because everybody used to get beaten, it was kind of fun. Like it was borderline a psychopath watching your friend getting beaten. I loved it, and I would laugh so much because when I'm being beaten, everybody else is laughing at me because of how I'm reacting. It's painful, but then imagine getting beaten. You don't know how you're going to react until you react, because everybody reacts different. And when someone reacts, it's kind of like comedy for the rest of us waiting to get beaten, because when you make those movements, or you're making a sound, or you're squealing, you're screaming, you're running away.
So I guess it's like you're finding like humor in the darkest of times.
Yes.
Yeah.
It doesn't still take away the fear that your turn's coming. Not at all. It's just you either laugh or you cry, but you can't cry until you've gotten your bit. So you have to wait until your turn, and then you get beaten, and then you cry, and then you laugh again. So in a day would get beaten up to 5 times with 5 different teachers.
So can you imagine, for people from Australia or the Western world, America, whatever, how you would feel getting ready for school every morning, knowing that you have to face that at school? And so the reason I'm saying that is I want people to know, like, when people from Kenya, they come to Australia, how basically the tribulation they've been through when they arrive. And you know, in the Western world, we have a different perspective on struggles at school, like bullying, which I'm sure they have in Kenya too.
Yeah. But yes, there was still bullying, but it wasn't the main focus at school. Like, you'd still get people getting bullied, but nobody really talked about it as bullying, because if you're reported to the teacher as the bully, or you do something, you know what the repercussions are.
Yeah.
So and most of the time, even the parents would come to school and join the teacher in beating you up. So your parent will beat you, and then your teacher will beat you, and sometimes they'll even beat you in the parade, like the assembly, where everyone's watching. And then they'll tell the kids, the younger kids, because in the parade there'll be kids from the lower classes to the senior classes, and they'll tell the kids to look at how bad this boy is or this girl is, and they'll say, what do we say, kids? Like, the kids were trained to repeat, pull up your socks, do better, you're a bad person, or whatever they would say. But it was always so ridiculous when they did that, and they shamed you in front of everyone, because then you become this label of a person where when you're walking at school, everyone knows you and everybody knows what you did and what kind of a person you are. So there was not so much of the bullying, because they shamed and punished you in front of everyone. So then you wouldn't have the same power that you thought you did when you were doing what you were doing.
That's so dangerous for when you're young, like your mind is being shaped by your environment, and you know, that's the time when you need support by your community.
Yes.
And being drawn attention to your failures and your, you know, it's so damaging.
Yes.
And how long were you at school again? Like for primary school?
The
To 12 from 3. Isn't it 3 years old or something?
Oh yeah, no, 2 years old.
2 years old to 12.
Yes.
So imagine that conditioning of a child over that course of time. And then you'd see or get an idea of how these people are in Kenya, and how their view of education would be, and then they would come to the West, or they'd see movies, I suppose,
Yes.
and it would seem like a free-for-all, basically.
Oh my God, watching movies when I was a kid. There's something about it when you're in Kenya and you watch these people on TV. It's like another world. Like it doesn't feel like,
It is another world.
yeah, it doesn't feel like something achievable, or it's like you're watching what we would think now, what heaven's like. You know how they say heaven's the land of milk and honey and this and that? That's how we saw the Western world, like full of money and all beauty and golden and every nice thing, and no, like everybody was treated really nice. And even we would see it when white people, can I say that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when white people came to Kenya for to see the animals, tourism, would see how different it was for them. And even the kids, like when they came as a family, the kids would always ask the mom, like, "Mom, can I eat this?" And the way there was so much kindness from the mom to the child, the way they spoke to the child, the child was so in their element, like they were a child and they had a voice. In Kenya, if you're a child amongst adults, you do not say a thing. You can ask for something like food or this and that, but you have no say. You can't, "Oh, I don't like this, I don't like that." That does not exist. Your child and your position is that.
You see, in the Western world, we have not so many problems with survival. Survival is something that gets left, you don't even think about it. You want food, you have food. You want shelter, you have shelter. You want to be warm, there's power, And that's something you don't think about in Australia, especially. In Kenya, there's no... When you're a parent, there's no messing around. You have to provide food, shelter, warmth to you and your family, and there's a sense of survival. Tracy was telling me the other day that some of the poorer people, that they live in a mabati, which is kind of like a corrugated metal house.
Yes.
They have to deal with sleeping with rain coming in on them.
Yeah, like when it's raining, you get soaked. You have to start patching and putting buckets on the ground so the whole floor doesn't get wet, and you have to move the position of your bed. They don't really have beds in those kind of houses. It's more like mats, like the outdoor mat. The very tough one. Yeah. That's what they'll sleep on, with just 1 or 2 blankets.
So you gotta really respect the hustle, in modern day terms, about how these people, and they still have to go to school, and the beatings still come, and there's an element of actual survival to growing up as a Kenyan. Now, when I go to Kenya, I'm quite aware of that, and you have to show a lot of respect wherever you are.
Yeah.
One thing that drives me crazy is when, I hear stories of people that come to Kenya, and the Kenyans, they're very hospitable. They'll offer you what they have.
Yeah.
And people will be very like, oh, I'm not trying that, or, that's not for me, or this. And it shows that the detachment from the reality that is living in Kenya to where they're from in the Western world. And it actually shines a light on how basically people from the Western world can be so ignorant, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not everyone. Most people are nice. Some, not really.
Yeah.
But also, my experience in life is from Ahero. So that's a town. You could call it a village. Now it's a town. Back then, it was kind of like a village. So
And this was in the 1990s? Or?
Yes. So my view of that in the early 2000s, my view of life is from that time, and my childhood anyway, from that time and how it was at that time. But life was still good. Everyone was happy, even though there wasn't much.
So, you know what? We've actually talked about one question for a long time. We should move on to other questions, because this topic actually it's very interesting to me. Okay, let's finish. So basically,
school.
You finish school.
Yeah.
And then
you finish school, you have homework, you
and
do
then
your
dinner.
homework, and then dinner, repeat every single day.
How many days a week?
How many days a week?
Yeah.
So it depends. So up until class 5, you only go Monday to Friday.
Okay.
But when you're from class 6 to 8, which is maybe year 6, I don't know what the class and the years much, but from class 6 to class 8, you attend school on Saturday, and then class 7 and class 8, you attend school on Sundays. So it's literally from Sunday to Sunday, every single day. And when you finish the term, what would call it? Is that what it's called here? The term?
Yeah.
Yeah, when you finish the term, you only have 1 week of holidays, and then you start your holiday tuition. And the holiday tuition goes for 2 weeks, and it only leaves you with an extra week at the end of the holiday tuition before you start school again, because the holidays will be 4 weeks. So 1 week home, 2 weeks at school again, 1 week home again, and you start a new term for the next 3 months again. And it will be the same all year round.
If I was born into that, I think I'd ask my mum if I could go back in.
Yeah, so we were at school more than we were at home, and that was just the norm. And I would say our position in life when we were kids was average. Like, we grew up average. My parents worked really hard to provide what we had.
Absolutely.
And we were at a point of privilege more than other people around our area. So we acknowledged that, and we helped people where we could. And it was nice.
Okay, next question.
Okay. What were some of the core values instilled in you by your family in Kenya? How do these values compare to the values typically emphasized in Australian families? The main values instilled in us in Kenya would be, I wouldn't say honesty, because it was so strict in that it would be very hard to be honest at all times. The main one would be respect.
Yeah.
You had to respect your elders.
Yes.
There was no two ways about it. It was respect.
Yeah.
And that's it. You can't talk back. You do what you're told. You follow the rules. And obedience. You respect and you obey. Those are the two main ones I've seen that I add. In Australia, yes, there's respect, but obedience, I haven't seen that here in Australia.
Well, from my growing up, I grew up with older people, so they had that 1950s era mentality about parenting, and it was similar with respect, but at the same time, it wasn't so like you are a child, so you can't be seen or heard type of thing. It's more like, that's Michael, that's an individual named Michael. He's this age. It was more tailored to your personality. Because my cousin, who I grew up with, he's ADHD.
Yes.
And the same rules wouldn't work for him.
Yeah.
And I think though, if he grew up in Kenya, he'd have no choice, because he might as well be glued to a beating rod, because the way that he grew up with me, like we used to get kicked out of like burger places because he'd put spitballs in a straw and go at the workers, and like things like that, but these modern times, I think with the internet and stuff like that, because parents now are glued to their phones, they don't like pay as much attention to children, or they have a more like a worldview of discipline.
What I would say about Australia, and also with parenting my kids here in Australia, is in Kenya it's more a community. It's more, you're brought up by everybody around you, so you have to respect everyone, because it wasn't just your parents taking care of you, it was the nannies, your neighbor, your grandmother, your aunties, everyone did what they could. But in Australia, parenting is left to just the parents. The neighbor has got nothing to do with anything. Your auntie, your whatever, we don't have much relatives here.
Even the grandparents here, like I know I've heard stories where the grandma won't even like get in the way of the mother, the certain way that she'd raise the child. Raising up kids in Australia is a two-person's thing, but it depends, unless you're a single parent, I would say. And so it's the kid gets used to just you from when they're born, unless you take them to daycare. And even when they go to daycare, there's so many other kids there, so many behaviors, so many whatever's happening at daycare, that the kids learn from other kids. So if the other kids have bad manners, your kid picks it up and they bring it home. So we didn't take our kids to daycare when they were very young. We took them when they were a little older. But being with your child every single day at home with no help, they get used to you. That's what I would say. So even the respect, it's there, but they know how to manipulate it.
Yes, they know your mom and they know your dad. So they know there's love there, and they don't have to do much to get your attention or your love or whatever, because as parents there's unconditional love. So whether they do bad, you're still going to show them love 10 minutes, 5 minutes after they've done wrong. But in Kenya, because your parents were mostly at work during the day, when you're with the nanny or when you're with your auntie or your grandma, if you did, you could not do something wrong most of the time, because even if you did, they'll beat you and then they'll be angry at you for the rest of the day, and then you have to suffer with someone who's not your mom or your dad for the rest of the day, with no love, no care, no nothing. Now they're frowned at you, and as a child that's scary. So if you do that the first time,
you learn.
You learn not to do it the next day, because then you don't want to have a terrible day every single day.
Okay, next question.
Next question. What? How did your Kenyan upbringing shape your view on hard work and perseverance? How does this differ from work ethics, often associated with Australians?
Let me just say this. The thing about Kenya is they have a really good work-life way of thinking. And in Australia, it's work before everything else. And you know, I've worked in hospitals, and you're encouraged. It's like a culture of like, if you don't stay back, you're letting everybody down, or it is so shameful to take your break and leave everyone else if you know they can't, if things are too busy, or it's too, you know, it's too busy to go home on time. Like, I've worked mainly in places for the past 10 years where your home time that you're rostered to is basically an estimate. Like, you will always be staying back. In fact, the last place I worked at, you know, you could end up staying back another 5 hours.
Yeah.
And, you know, your family is always left to the side. In Kenya, when you go there, family is first.
Yes.
And work is second.
Yes.
And that, to me, is what life should be about. Like, honestly, it's just so... People are way more closer to each other, way more... You don't feel isolated there. Like Tracy's saying, like,
Yeah.
when they raise children, everyone raises a child and stuff like that. When our children are in Kenya, they're like different, because they're with everyone, talking to everyone. They're much more open.
Yes.
When we first took them there, they didn't talk as much. When they were there, they started talking more.
Yeah, because one main thing I realized with kids and the difference with them here in Australia and Kenya is, in Australia, it's very hard to talk to anybody most of the time if you don't know them.
Yeah,
So
it's
you
cliquey.
can't. Yes.
It's a cliquey place. People will deny, but it absolutely is.
Yes. So you most of the time, even with the kids, when you go to the shops, it's you and them. Like, you can't be... The kids can say hi, and that's as far as it can go. Like, some people would respond, some psychopaths would not. I don't know who would not respond to a kid saying hello.
Yeah, some people just
don't. Yeah.
ignore.
Yeah,
like,
and it's so weird, because then the kids like, oh, that's like, they don't even... It's different, because they don't expect people to behave like that.
It could... As sad as it is, like in this country, as in most countries, people and their views of mixed race or mixing races even is put onto children. And you can see that, you know, like if someone doesn't, and this is a whole nother story, like for another episode, but like, you know, I think when some people, if they see our children, it doesn't fit in their little, you know, construct of like, these people should stick with these people. So, you know, this is a product of something I don't agree with, so I'm not even going to respond to them and say hello, you know.
It's crazy. I find it hilariously stupid.
It's just sad to me. It's just sad.
But in Kenya, the contrary. Like, I feel like in Kenya, when we're walking, the kids, like literally anywhere, I can have a conversation with anybody, and the conversation could go anywhere. Like, there's no limits. You can, oh, how are you going today? You can talk about whatever you want. Like, oh, don't see you here often. There's no boundaries. There's no fear of talking to someone because you think they won't respond.
Yeah, like
Everybody responds.
there's these two guys that when we go to Kenya, I buy my things off them.
Yeah.
Kennedy and his son. Shout out to Kennedy and his son if you're watching. I miss you. I'm coming back.
They won't be watching.
They might be watching. I don't know.
They won't be watching.
But I buy like ornamental things from Kenya, like touristy stuff.
Yeah.
And anyway, those guys don't know us from anyone apart from us buying stuff. But the last time I went there, they're like, you gotta come to our house for dinner. We'll cook you chicken.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's not just them saying that. Like, we literally, if I said to them,
Yeah, let's
what
go.
about tonight? They'll be like, yeah. And then we'd all go to their house for dinner.
Yeah, Kenya is more social.
Kisumu to Perth, it's